The journey begins at the narrow gate. The journey, Jesus beckons me to roam. The journey, where the path is straight. The journey that takes me home. The journey takes me home.
Good morning and welcome to The Journey. Glad you could join us this morning or whatever time of day it might be for you, but we're glad you're here with us as we talk about our journey. Our journey along life with Christ. And sometimes Christ and our journey joined long ago, and sometimes, as we saw last week, it began rather late. This morning, have with us Lola, Pittard. I just want to tell you, I had a great time when Lola and I were getting together and going through this. It was great. You know, we could do a 4-hour show, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Lola has got some wonderful stories, so if you've never taken time to just sit down with Lola, do it. So I was blessed by our time together, so yeah. So we want to talk about your journey this morning, Lola, and really as we were talking and going through it, it really struck me that your journey is more of a long journey in the same direction. So you've known Christ for a long time, but not necessarily in a way that you've lately really come to know Him.
That's true.
So why don't you start us off with how your journey began?
Well, I would say my journey began in Bakersfield, California in 1940. And I went... my mom took us to church, I think, as long as I could remember, probably even when I was a baby. But she always took us to church. And we went a little bit to a Nazarene church, but mainly we went to the Methodist church when we moved into the house where that they bought. And but my dad never went to church. But that didn't seem odd. That didn't seem odd at all. That's what a lot of people did. And so I went there. You learn sort of right and wrong, but I don't remember ever hearing the gospel. And if it did, it just went right by me. Mm-hmm. So, but I did hear it at the Nazarene church. My best friend in high school, especially, I would go with her to church. And of course, they were a little extreme, I thought, because, you know, they had altar calls and all kinds of things that were a little strange for the Methodist church. And so I knew I heard the gospel, but it didn't make a difference to me at that time. And, but I noticed the difference in my household. They didn't, since my father didn't go to church, I think my mom didn't talk about God, or we didn't pray at meals like my girlfriend's family did, because her dad went to church, and there was just a whole different atmosphere. Right. But you did what was right, and you did what you needed to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of how I grew up. You
grew up knowing right and wrong. You were a moral person.
Yeah. Because you do learn that when you go to church, no matter if you hear the gospel, because you hear all the Bible stories, and you hear, you know, you just know, and you hear the 10 Commandments, and so you know what's right and wrong. And but for some reason, as I was growing up, there were two things that really affected my life in a negative way. And one, I've learned that people can make some decisions at some point in their life, and they affect them, but they don't even really realize they've made them. And one of mine was that I didn't feel like my father loved me. I'm really thankful that later on in life we cleared that all up. And but the other one was, for some reason, I decided I wasn't smart enough for, you know, going to college or anything. And so when you have those ideas and you don't feel good about yourself, you live your whole life that way, and it affects everything you do.
Yes.
So I
You moved away at 18, is that right?
yeah, I decided that I didn't need to go to high school or anything like that. So, what other choice? You get married, and
you mean
then
you didn't want you said high school, but you meant college, right?
I said college. Oh, did I say high school? Yes.
think
No.
you did. Well,
I
I
didn't think
wrong.
I'd go to college because yes, I did graduate from high school, but college wasn't sort of an option because of course I wasn't smart enough. And then, so I got married, and shortly later had David, my son, and then moved down to Los Angeles and had my daughter Michelle.
Okay.
And what I didn't know was that my husband was an alcoholic, and so that was really difficult, and so life was really strange. And then one night he got a little violent, and what still surprises me to this day is that I had I knew I didn't think real highly of myself or had low self-esteem, but I knew I did not deserve that.
Yes.
And so I left and went back to Bakersfield to live with my parents, and then
Which is really quite remarkable.
I think it is.
Yeah, because most women stay in those relationships for quite a while.
For a long time, I put up with a lot of it, where
Yeah.
basically it was just one event,
Wow.
one major event, and it was like, I mean, I was scared. I didn't even really have any major injuries
Mm-hmm.
that, but I knew that I did not deserve that kind of treatment.
Right, and you certainly didn't want your kids being part
And
of
they
it.
did not need to see it because
Yeah.
they saw part of that. And so, or my son did. So I moved back to Bakersfield, and like I say, the one thing that I've always thought is a flaw is that, well, you just do what you need to do. So you go to work, and one nice thing about being a young mother is you enjoy your children. You play with games with them, and you just, participate in their life. And so go to work, you take care of your family, and then 3 years later, I was introduced to a fellow, and we decided to get married. And probably one of the reasons it didn't work as well is because of the way I felt about myself.
Mm.
But we had then 11 months later a daughter, my daughter Karen,
Okay.
and then began our journey of moving.
So you were about 25 years old at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
About that old. And so one of the things, he would come home, got a job in San Jose. Okay. So you just do what you need to do, and you go to San Jose. Well, we only stayed there a year, and he comes home one day, well, I got a job in Portland.
Oh.
Okay. So we go to Portland.
Here we go.
Yeah. And so we moved to Portland. But things between us, there were those issues just like that, where he was kind of decided and I'm just kind of going along.
Yeah.
But I had this thought just kept coming to mind. Oh, I need to go to church.
Yeah, I remember you saying that the relationship was difficult, and you were wondering what to do, and you thought, this thought just kept coming.
Yeah.
Go back to church.
Go to church. And because I didn't know Christ,
Yeah.
it was go to church.
Right.
And so I was working just like, because you do what you need to do. The kids were in school, and you helped with the hot lunch program and the Cub Scouts and whatever. So one of the mothers there said, well, come to my church. They have a junior church. And I thought, well, good. My kids weren't used to being in church.
Sure.
And so this would be good for them. And so I went to church with her. And then I knew. I heard the message God wanted me to hear. And that's why he took me back there. Christ died for me.
Mm.
It was like, what? it wasn't Christ died on the cross, Christ died for me. And so I accepted that gift from him and was baptized and got involved in that church and had friends that we got together and went to, did Bible studies and went to hear some great speakers. Like I told you, I got to hear Corey Ten Boom
Yeah, that's amazing.
speak, because we would go to all these things that were around like that. And so I was growing and really enjoying that. And I did help with Vacation Bible School. I didn't always have a car, so I didn't help with a lot of other things. But it was just, it was a great time. And what really surprised me is actually, I thought about it a couple of times, but when I really was going through here, we only lived there 3.5 years. But it seemed like a long time.
Well, I remember as we were talking that you had said that experience, that Christ coming into your life really changed your life.
Yes, I used some poor language, and it just stopped immediately. But also, when I had tried to really think about the Bible or read it, or because at different times I tried to see what I could do because I knew I needed to change something, it didn't make sense. And so now all of a sudden, and what I love most is God would just come along and show me little things. And so if there was something would come up I'd heard at church, well then maybe I'd hear it from the neighbor. She had read something, she'd come share it with me, or my little group, somebody would bring something up, the same thing up, or I'd hear it on the radio. Just, okay, God, I got it. You've said that 3 or 4 times now. I think I got it. and so that I really loved that. And then of course, my husband was not working a little bit, so he'd gone down, picked up a little house in Toledo, Oregon, so he could fish with his friends. And now he was laid off, and we moved to this little shack in Toledo to. So a whole new change.
Can you just tell a story or two about that little shack, because you had some wonderful stories about the shack, and I think you got to tell at least one of them. I mean, you said well, I'll leave it to you to decide.
So one of the things is that, like I say, it was just a little shack. It was run down where the door opened into the kitchen. There was no doorstop, so there's a big hole in the wall, And the worst one was that next to the toilet there was a hole, and so if you went in there, especially after dark, because mice would come up through there, you kept your feet moving the whole time in there so that the mice wouldn't come up. But of course we managed to get rid of them. But we went to get a permit to fix it up and found it had been condemned.
Oh no!
So anyway, we then decided we weren't going to fix it up or do anything.
Right.
We'd traded a vehicle for the little property next door, so we sold those and moved to a house up on the hill. And, but
no mice in the toilet.
No mice in the toilet. It was interesting because we laughed about it. In fact, I told you my son and I were just talking about that the other day, and he said, "How did you feel about living there, Mom?" And I said, "It was just an adventure."
Yeah.
And this is the thing where you just go along with whatever it is,
right.
and make it work. So then we moved up on the hill, and but things weren't going real well. Like I say, I attended a church, but I didn't feel part of it, and I think a part of that was because my life was so messy. We had some conflicts in the family, and my husband had hurt his back at work. So at that time, the state had a program that they would send you for retraining. And so he went to Portland during the week and learned, I tried to remember what it was he learned, but I couldn't. A new job to do something different because he repaired TVs and he couldn't lift them up anymore because that's when the TVs were very big.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
And so he would come home on the weekends, but things were just not good. And then my son got into trouble, and my husband said, "I want him out of here." Like, "What do you mean out of here?" And he says, "I don't care, just out." Well, I wasn't going to put him out on the street, so I contacted my brother, and I sent him to live there. And then we just, not very long after that, we moved to Seaside, Oregon. Of course, we bought a business because that's what he was going to do to make a living.
Right.
And I had been working part-time at the library. And I was thinking about that and realized, well, that's why. It was because when we needed a little extra income while he was going to school, and that was a limited income.
Right.
So we moved to, it was just a part-time job, it was fun. But we moved to Seaside and had this business. It was a motel, a mobile home park, and in the center of that was an RV park with restrooms and things, and then a camping area. And so now we're in business. No.
Yeah. And you're mid-30s right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'd never done anything like that, but we all just jumped in. David had come back to live with us, and so the kids went to school. And Michelle was in her sophomore in high school when we moved.
Wow.
But that move was so hard for my youngest daughter, Karen, and that I think I made more of a promise to myself that I would never move her again away from that. So we just did our little thing. We all worked in the business. But in Seaside, in the summertime, the kids, you didn't see your friends because everybody worked. It was a tourist town, and that's when all the jobs were. And if you didn't work in your parents' business, you worked somewhere else. So Dave worked downtown and like an amusement park thing, and the girls worked in the motel, and even Karen at 11 was covering the office.
Wow.
And so they just knew how to do everything. I showed them how to do, bank deposits and all that. But like I say, because of all the things that went on, it wasn't good. My husband started going down to the Moose Club and drinking pretty heavily. So he and David then had another little conflict, and so Dave, he didn't quite finish high school, but he moved out and went to work, and he was working part-time anyway, but he moved out. And then Michelle graduated from high school because she just had a couple of years to go, and so she graduated from high school, and she was going to go to Bakersfield to work in my mother's bookkeeping business because she wanted to be an accountant. She already knew. And then she could go to the community college there, what they call junior college, because that didn't cost very much.
Right, yeah.
So that's what she did. And I really enjoyed the church and was really, taught a Sunday school class, and same thing, learning lots of things. My favorite time was the Sunday evening service because it seemed so personal.
Yes.
Fewer people, and it was really fun. And so I was involved in that and trying to do all the things I thought God wanted me to do. And like I say, there were times when it worked really well, where probably I was counting on Him more so I could feel that presence, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it seemed to work fairly well, but I tried to not make waves. God dealt with my anger. I had some anger issues, and so He took me through that, actually through a class up at the Astoria College, and so I learned to deal with that and not to get angry anymore. I mean, and I think I believe that people with low self-esteem who have painful things, if they don't feel they're loved, they're very sensitive because that just plugs into everything that's ever happened to them. And so they react strongly to things and to hurts. I took every little thing personal.
Right.
I remember once my husband said, "Wow, this dinner was really good." Well, what was wrong with the rest of them? Because you're immediately prickly.
Sure.
And it's like, oh, Lola. And so God said, "No, you can't do this. You gotta not do this anymore." And I'm so thankful for that because it took time. It took time, and took this class, and
well, that's part of your long journey in the right direction. See,
yeah.
Nobody who knows you now would ever think that you had an anger issue at all. Not a chance.
Instant, yeah, just instant. And so and the thing is, this is the reason I suppose I can sympathize with people who have that. I could ruin more times. Like, just say, for instance, if we were trying to do something and I get mad, well, that puts a tone in here and sets a whole, like a big black cloud that sets in the room.
Yeah.
And even if it's over with and you go on, you've darkened the whole mood. And and so the very thing I didn't want to do, even to draw attention to myself, which I still laugh about because you draw more attention to yourself by doing that.
Yeah.
But you hurt and you just don't think you matter. And it's hard. It's hard. And I can really sympathize with people because it's not an easy thing to do. But what I learned is anger is a cover up for another emotion. And I learned that I didn't want to deal with it. I was embarrassed or felt stupid. So I just get angry. So I wasn't gonna deal with that.
Wow.
I was not gonna face the fact that I wasn't doing very well.
You know, listening to you, I think we're going to have another show. We're going to call it Counseling with Lola.
Well, thank you. But so that's what was so interesting to me is as I looked at this and went through that. So we sold the business, bought a little house in town, and then my husband decided that he wasn't. I think I told you he didn't. Karen graduated because it was just Dave was off working someplace else and Michelle had gone to California, so it was just Karen. And she was graduating from junior high school. They had a little graduation program. And he didn't show up. And so the next morning, we just lived a few blocks from the school, so I was getting ready for work and she went over to the school to pick up some things. And I heard the door open and I looked around and was my husband coming in and I said, "Oh, it's you," because I thought it was Karen. He said, "Well, is that all you got to say?" I'm like, "Okay, what's wrong with this picture? You've been out all night and you just walk in and what? That's all I've got to say." So, but at that time, I could have, if I'd have really understood who God wanted me to be, I'd have handled that completely different. But I didn't. And so, anyway, he said, well, he was leaving, and I said, okay, but you don't get to come back in because he'd done that a couple times. So then it was just me and Karen, and we were pretty poor, but we got by, and we just enjoyed things and made the best of it. And the summer between her junior and senior year, Michelle came home for the summer because she was finished with the college at the junior college, and she came home and worked at the Pig and Pancake. And that was a fun summer for us because Michelle was back and we had some good times.
Good.
And then the next year Karen graduated from high school, but a friend of hers who was a couple of years older was living down in Cannon Beach, and Karen wanted to, she went to live with her. She decided she'd go down there and share the apartment with her, and she worked in Cannon Beach because she was, for whatever reason, didn't even think about going to college. I still don't know why Michelle thought about it, but that was Michelle. Is a whole different person. And so she moved down there and worked. But before that, after a couple of years after her dad left, just because he then moved to Sutherland to open a business with his brother, and I just legally, he didn't contribute to our house at all, but yet he was still tied into it with his name on everything. Sure. So I really decided that I really need to legally get that all settled. Right. And I can't even remember all the legal things I ran into, but there were quite a few.
I imagine, yeah.
So I filed for divorce, but at the church I was going to, that wasn't acceptable, and so they asked me not to teach Sunday school. But I kept going to church because Karen was involved in the youth group, and then, like I say, it was just a little bit. She was off. Out of high school, and so then she moved down to Cannon Beach. She went to Cola Bible School, and then her dad called and said, "We want to open an antique store. Would you come be my partner?" And so she moved to Hillsboro with him to do that. Okay. So now I'm in Seaside all by myself.
Yeah, and this was a pretty hard time. I mean, as we were talking, it was. I mean, you file for divorce, the church says, "Oh, no, now you can't teach Sunday school," because churches in those days believed certain things that aren't necessarily true, and your kids are gone, and you're wondering,
Yeah.
okay, what do I do, and where's God, kind of thing.
You know, the one thing through it all, and because even with that, where I didn't go to church, and then I didn't quite, you're by yourself, you kind of know what, I remember somebody saying, what are you going to do? And I said, well, anything I want to. I can watch TV or not. I can cook something or I don't have to.
Sure.
I hadn't done that. I'd never been like that on my own, totally. I went from home to marriage.
Yeah.
And so this was a new experience. But as I looked back a little, I saw that my little group of women, when I first came to know the Lord, we had taught, one of the things we talked about was your value can be in being a mother. That you need to know you have value other than that, and in God, of course, but you have value other than that, so that it's not so devastating when your kids leave home.
Sure.
So I had kind of taken that to heart and used it when the kids all left. It's like, okay. And then I got a call from a friend and asked if I wanted to kind of move to Portland. And so I moved to Portland, rented out my little house, and at a law firm downtown Portland.
You were early 40s.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I moved there, and like I say, just do what you have to do. You work. Well, I was searching for a church, but I wasn't finding one. For a while, when I lived on one side of town, I went to this one church, literally went there for a whole year, and nobody spoke to me. Now, granted, I just came in and sat in a pew and left, but I was wanting to go to some of the Sunday school classes, and I'd look at things, but I couldn't figure some of it out, so I just would leave. But then I started dating a friend of mine. I was not going to ever get married again, but we'd gotten to be friends and going places, and so I said, well, come to church with me. And he said, okay. So he came. 3 people spoke to us that day. Like,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
But as I was kind of complaining about that in the car, the thought, because I always think God sort of said, Lola, if you're concerned about that, maybe you should do something about that.
Right.
And I didn't use it then, but I've used it since. That if you're really concerned about something, maybe God's calling you to be the one who speaks to people and says hello. And so
God took your complaint
Yeah.
and turned it into a ministry, really.
Yeah. So, like I say, I didn't use it then, but I did use it much later. So we got married, and I finally remember the name of the church, Cedar Mills.
Oh, okay.
We went to Cedar Mills, and it was a big church, and we really enjoyed it, but we didn't participate much. We just were there. We went to a couple special things, but we really didn't. But I knew that I wasn't going to get married unless my husband went to church with me.
Sure.
Because, of course, originally I was never going to get married. That's why we were just friends.
Yeah.
And, because, no, I'm not going to get married again. I've already made a mess of that twice. So I'd do that again. And, but when he went to church with me, I mean, he was willing to try to go to church with me. I hadn't found one I really wanted to go to, but he was willing to do that. And I think because I didn't realize it, but he'd been baptized as a young boy, and he missed some of that. He hadn't been for a long time, so he wanted that too. So we went to Cedar Mill, and then when he retired a few years later.
I'm just going to add, you were 50 years old when you were
Oh
married.
yes, when we got married, I was 50.
Yeah.
And so we went to. He retired, and we decided that we had been living in a manufactured home park. We had different plans. We were going to travel, and we thought we'd just buy that
Sure.
because then it's looked after and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But that kind of didn't work out, and they didn't live. It was a new park, but they didn't kind of live up to their end of it of keeping things up.
Oh.
So, and they kept they started raising the rent. I mean, 2 or 3 times a year. So we thought, okay, we got to move. So we then looked outside of Portland to find a place that was reasonable. We went to Scappoose, which is Highway 30 north of Portland. You think Portland's right on the river, but it curves up a little bit, and you can go quite a ways toward
I had to
Longview.
look that up. Scappoose.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it. I thought, what? It's like Union. Where's that?
That's right, exactly. So so we moved there, and a brand new house, and that was fun. And then the lady who put in our curtains, of new blinds and stuff, invited us to her church, which is a little town up the road called Warren. It's just basically, it wasn't really a town, it was just an area.
Right.
And sort of like Union doesn't have a city hall or anything.
Right.
So we went there for 7 years. We went to Warren, a community church, and we got involved. We took a class and joined the church. He started, they had several music teams. He started playing his stand-up bass in the one music team, and then I would do the overhead. I tried a couple of Bible studies, but I was still working full time. And so some of them it worked out and some of them didn't. Tried to do K. Arthur's, and that's a lot of work.
Right.
So I couldn't keep up with that and work at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, we went to church there for 7 years, and the only people who really spoke to us were probably the same 5 people that had introduced us to it, the greeters at the door, and maybe a couple of other people. Even the people on his music team didn't come up and speak to me.
Oh, wow.
And so that hit me again when we...
Well, there's a lesson for
Yeah.
Dan and the worship team. Speak to each other.
Yeah, and greet the other members of the team and stuff, because anyway, so then his health, he'd had a lot of health issues. He had lost his leg below the knee and had really bad arteries, and so he had lots of aneurysms and had to have things replaced.
Oh, wow.
And so he had been sick, and it took him a lot longer to recoup from that. And I thought, I'm going to retire early. So at 62 and a half, I decided to retire just so I'd have more time with him.
Yeah.
And when we decided that, we didn't need the big house we had in Scappoose, so we had been up we had a motorhome, and so we had been up in Lewis County camping, and we had seen some places there. And so we thought we'd start looking.
Mm-hmm.
And Lewis County, Centralia, and all that area.
Okay.
And so we actually looked at some property in Napa Vine, put money down on it, contingent on some things, and found a manufactured home that we liked. And but then to store everything, they wouldn't put up half the things in storage. He had an organ that he played, and they wouldn't put that in the storage, and you couldn't put any kind of liquid things like gas or the lawnmower. So, okay. So he said, well, why don't we just go into some place that we can just move into?
Right.
So he called a few places, and we went, the one place what we thought when it was in Lewis County was the realtor had an ad. It was actually up here in Mason County. So we came up and looked. And what was interesting to me is that we had attended that church, but we didn't do a lot of studying. I did some studying, but he didn't care for Bible studies.
Right.
And so we weren't really talking a lot about God. But as we got ready to move, we both saw God's hand in a lot of stuff. The way he pulled it all together, the house and the view, and so that we could move in by the time, because we'd already sold our house, and so we had to be out by a certain time. I think I told you we were going to have a garage sale because this house was smaller than we had anticipated.
Right.
And we had furniture to sell, and a lot of marked items. Well, if you've ever done a garage sale, it's kind of hard to show the things in the house and have somebody out there showing the things that
Yes.
out there in the garage that you're selling.
Right.
And so
I'm going to try to avoid garage sales.
yes. And so he just put up a sign while he was labeling everything for our garage sale. And all the furniture was sold by the day the garage sale came around.
Oh, wow.
And so we both looked at each other and said, whoa. We knew it was God for some reason. And that still baffles me a little bit that we understood that. And even for when we moved up here, and we knew that. And then I was still working a little bit in Portland and had the motorhome down there, and I would stay there and come up for the weekend, or he'd come down there for the weekend and for about a month and a half. And then we came up here and we saw the signs for the church. Went to church, and well, he'd been bringing boxes from the storage that we could see that we could fit in the house, and a lot of things weren't, so we got to sell those. Yeah. And they were talking about having a rummage sale. Like, oh, we looked at each other. Yeah, that's where our house is going.
That's our church right there.
Because we lived past the fire hall, up a pretty steep road, and we were the only house up there. And then around the corner was another little place, and that's not real conducive to a garage sale.
Yeah, right.
And so we decided that's what we'd do. But then, because my husband was a retired fire chief, and he had been involved in a lot of things, he said, well, we've got a lot of stuff. We need to help. Okay, we'll help. And so there we went. We started helping. But the first day we went to that church is when I realized that we met more people. More people came up and spoke to us in that one Sunday than the whole 7 years.
Wow.
At that other church. And that's when God brought back, remember what I told you? At that other church? Right. You need to speak to people.
Yeah.
And so we just got involved. It's what we wanted to do, and we had the opportunity. I think it was a while before he started playing his stand-up bass, but he started playing with the music team. He noticed that the pastor was doing a lot himself, so he said, we need to help. So we printed the bulletins, did the overhead, we just did everything, just whatever we could do.
Yeah.
And but God, one of the ways God worked as far as telling me to speak to other people is, we used to drive from our house past where Nancy Johnson lived, and we didn't know Nancy, but we knew Greg, her neighbor. And Greg, well, hi Greg, and he was up there on the porch. Oh, so he had told us that Nancy Johnson had told us where she lived, and she was having a liver transplant. So we all started praying for her. And then one day he was sitting on that porch, and we waved at him, and he said, "Oh, this is Nancy and Ted." We're yelling across from the street up, but. Well, it was not up so much. Their house was down lower then. But anyway, one Sunday I saw her at church, and then she kind of just scooted out. And God said, go say something to her. I literally ran out into the parking lot, and I said, Nancy, I said, really glad you're here. I don't know what else I said to her. She said I told her about the quilters, but I don't know. I just wanted to let her know that we'd prayed for her and that we were glad she was there.
Yeah.
And then I walked back in and thought, oh, what did I do? How embarrassing. But I couldn't forget that one message that God had given me to speak to other people. And so God just keeps it going, and you keep growing, and he kept showing me things. And then even at one point, we're busy doing everything. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Oh, yeah, I can do that. And so one day, I felt God say, I know you're doing lots of things, Lola, but are you doing what I want you to do? Oh, well, I didn't think about that. I was just doing.
Right.
And so then I began to stop and but that's what I mean. He's the kind of God who just keeps for me, showing me little things. Yeah. Here you need to go. Yeah. And always. And so I just figured out that for 35 years I knew God, and all of that time I never forgot that Christ died for me. Mm-hmm. It was never a doubt in my mind. I didn't feel like, oh no, God has nothing to do with it. No, still love God. Still knew Christ had died for me. Yeah. I just didn't know how to walk with him. And that's what God gave me here. Yeah. And I'm still learning, because I still, every day, he tells me something new. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I know when we talk, and you usually tell me something. Hey, you know what God told me? What? Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, because I found that if I would share with that, when I would something exciting that I learned that God And I would always say, God told me, because that if you're reading His Word, what else is it? You know?
Sure, yeah.
And so I would just share that. But to me, it was, just wanted to share something because I thought it was exciting.
Yeah.
And so many times people said, "Oh, that's exactly what I need to hear." Well, great. I'm glad God could use it. That wasn't. I have no idea.
Right.
No idea at all. And a couple of times it's like they were struggling with something that and it was like I was the messenger that God sent to share that with them, so that they would learn and be whatever He wanted them to know.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea, and still don't have any idea. So I guess I could say, if I share something with people, and you think I'm telling you what to do, no, God's just telling me something, and I'm just telling you what He told me.
Right. Well, one of the things that struck me about this journey with God was how people in your life kept inviting you to church.
Yeah.
And would talk to you. And that seems to be a theme, because even now as you're speaking, it strikes me as how God says, Lola, tell this person. Lola, say this. Mm-hmm. And you have no idea.
No.
But you're just being obedient to Christ, and you don't know what's going on in their life, but they needed to hear exactly what you said.
Yes. And so the thing that I remember when I was in a Baptist church in Seaside, because like I say, I participated there. Mm-hmm. I was sitting there one Sunday, and I thought, this one lady, Maxine, would come and play the organ. Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night, and she was, the door was open, she was there.
Right.
And it just hit me that, go tell Maxine how great you think. Because I thought, boy, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful she does that, Lord? And so he said, go tell her that. Okay. So I just went up and I just said. And that was one where God let me see a glimpse. It was a few weeks later that she told me that really meant a lot to her. Wow. That she was getting a little burned out, or a little thinking nobody cared.
Yeah.
And so that's why, if God gives me that prompting, like, go talk to Nancy.
Yeah.
And there were two ladies at this church here when I first came, because the first service was not, there wasn't a lot of people there. Mm-hmm. And so there were two ladies that came, and it was that prompting, go say hello to them. So, hi, how are you today? And like, what are you bothering me for? They give me that look, and I was in, and for me this is so amazing, because I was usually, if I got embarrassed or I felt stupid, then I wasn't going to do that again.
Right.
But I feel so grateful that I was still prompted to go do what God, told me. Mm-hmm. So every Sunday, and the other one just kind of smiled at me. She didn't even always answer. Mm-hmm. And I just did it every Sunday. But I did learn not to talk long to them, because that was, they obviously weren't comfortable, or didn't want to be. Mainly, probably, I thought they weren't comfortable. I never took it, they don't like me. They didn't know me, so how could they not know? They didn't know. I just thought they weren't comfortable with it, and so I thought, okay, I'll just limit it. And then one morning, the one lady who hardly even spoke gave me a hug. Like, wow. Okay, Lord, I see. And after that, she'd say, good morning to me. She'd go out of her way, give me a hug. Yeah. And the other lady started talking to me a lot more. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, that's all right.
Yeah. Wow.
But then, so we participated and did all the things in the church that we could. And then, because we'd moved here in 2003, and then in 2009, 2000, probably 2 years before that, an aneurysm that my husband had was bothering him. And he said to the doctor, I can feel my heart beating right there. And the doctor said, because they always were kidding, these two. And he said, well, at least you know you're alive. Right. But he said, well, when's the last time we checked that? He said, well, it's been a while. So they went and checked it. And it was really in need of repair, but they couldn't do it because of his heart. Oh. So he had to, we just had to learn to live with it. He had gone, and one doctor just said, practically in tears, I'm sorry, you need to get your house in order, because it could happen any day. Yeah. And that's when we learned to live one day at a time. Every morning we'd pray. We were doing Bible studies. We did our devotionals, and he even taught a Bible study. And he would, he got real involved in where he would do most of the service when the pastor wasn't there, except for the preaching. You know, he would run all, do the. I think the other person did the prayers, but he would introduce the music and just in charge. And so I even did a communion one Sunday. So we were really doing what we needed to do, and I thought it was because he didn't have. This was the end of his life. We knew we didn't know when it would happen, but we knew that he, like I say, he'd been so sick and didn't recover as well, and so I thought that's why God brought us here, so we could, you know, get that good connection going.
Yeah.
And then when we went to had his funeral, like I told you, I found out that people talked about what he meant to them and the things that he had given them, and even later, and I knew it was much bigger. Right. And so the one thing I do know is that it's always bigger than we see. Yeah. Much bigger than we know. Yeah. And so then I just continued with the church and did my thing. The only thing that was hard is that we used to have a soup on, I don't know, one day a week. It was in the church, the office part now where the Sunday school building is.
Okay. And
so it was pretty crowded. And we always went. There was a lot of people there that went, and it was fun. And so it took me a little bit, but I went that next time, and I made sure I had a friend who I went with. And then she got up to go talk to some people, and so where she'd been sitting, someone else came and sat down that I didn't know as well, and I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay there. It's just, he wasn't there.
Yes. Yeah.
And but the interesting part of that too that I had forgotten about until just this minute was he died on a Saturday night, or Friday night, Saturday morning, early. And Michelle and my son David were living, that was the other interesting thing, we bought that house, and there was just, she said, find me a place close that I can come so I can stay a month, because she was living in Japan, and you need to get away from always having to struggle to understand and everything. So just that one little place past us was a single wide mobile that was for sale, very inexpensive, and they bought it. So she could come and stay there, and then back and forth. There was a little path back and forth. And so then when she moved back, that's where she was living. Their money, they had some changes in their life, and she needed to come. So they were living in the house, and my son was there with her. And then they came down. It was really weird because I called the ambulance because I knew he was in trouble. That whole day on Friday, he just didn't get out of bed, and I knew that if he got up, he was probably going to be in trouble, and he usually always got up in the night. And so I had trouble getting him back out of the wheelchair into bed, and so I was just busy holding him, grabbed the phone and called because I didn't quite know what to do, and managed to run over and open the door, and then he was dead by the time they got there. And they put him back on the bed, and it was interesting because Aaron was out there with him, and he said, you want Aaron to come in? So of course she was a friend of ours, and so came in and talked with us. And then but Sunday morning and so the family was all there, I told my son, no, you have to stay down here with me.
Yeah, right.
You're down here.
Yeah.
And so and I said, I need you to stay here for about a month. And so, but that night when I went to bed, he said, you need to go to church on Sunday morning. You need to go, because there was 2 services, you need to go to that service.
God said that to you?
Yeah. It was like Floyd was saying, you got to go.
Wow.
You have to go tell them. You have to go so they'll know. Because if I just went to one service, you know how people want to say something, well, they're not going to get to.
Right.
And I said, okay, Michelle, we got to go.
Wow.
She said, all right, are you sure? And I said, well, yeah, got to do it. So I walked in. I was just kind of at the back. And, I just knew it was right. After people, the first thing somebody said that I knew it was right. Because they wanted to acknowledge that. Because like I say, we were at both services all the time. He played.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was right. And I didn't understand it, still don't. But I knew I had to be there, and it worked. And I was able to manage that.
Yeah.
But about 2 weeks after his service, another wonderful thing that God gave me was that I had my regular appointment because I have macular degeneration, but which I'd learned about when we lived in Scappoose, and by accident I'd gone for some other exam for some other reasons, and they said, "Oh, you've got macular degeneration," but it didn't affect my eyesight at all at that time. So I had this regular appointment, and I could see there was little waggly lines, and the right eye had a little. When I looked at the chart with the right eye, there was a little blank spot up in the corner of that grid, and but other than that, it didn't affect because my left eye was really good. So I went about every 6 months, and so I had this appointment. So I went, and I always had somebody drive me. I was trying to think of who that was, but anyway. Because they dilate your eyes.
Yes.
It's in Olympia.
Right.
So when I got in there and I looked at the chart, all I could read was a large E, the big E. That's all I could see. I couldn't read a single thing below that, and it was just frightening. It was sort of overwhelming. Yeah. And I just kind of threw up that quick prayer, "Oh Lord, what am I going to do?" And He poured His peace out on me. It just was the most amazing feeling. Like I said, it was almost like something pouring over you. Wow. You could almost feel it go across the body, and just, I'd like to have that peace every day. Yeah. But you don't get it every minute. But it was just, everything was just unbelievable. Just peace at the most, you think of the most amount that you can even think of it in any little bit, and it was just overpowering. Wow. And I wasn't worried anymore. And then what I realized later was it was almost like God spoke, and I had knowledge, and He said, "You don't have to worry, I got it covered." And I have not worried about it since, because He told me He had it covered. Yeah. It was just knowledge. It's just something you knew. It wasn't a voice. You just knew it, and I just knew it. Yeah. And I am so thankful for that. So when anything gets tough, I just go back to that. Hang on to those times. And that's the God that I love.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What a wonderful journey.
It has been.
Yeah.
In fact, even today, I was going to share that with you. Even today, when I was thinking about, you just do what you have to do. You just went blithely along, never thinking about things. And I always thought that was one of my biggest faults, is that I didn't make big decisions. And today He said, because as I was thinking over this, and I've talked with my kids and how they felt life was normal, that in that chaos that I lived in, and even some that I created, I tried to make life as normal, and just you go on and you do and you participate as I could. And now I see that wasn't bad at all. And I didn't even realize that. Yeah. And so
God was at work when you didn't even know.
All the time. Yeah. Now I did have a couple of scriptures.
Sure.
If I've got time.
Sure. Yes.
One that when I was looking for this scripture, because I have a whole pack of them, and you can see I had this one hanging on the wall. It's got the tape on the corner. Because I used it for a long time, and I realized if you kind of had not a literally life verse, this is one I used for a long time. And it's Psalms 13, 5 and 6. "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praises, for He has been good to me." And that's basically been what I've really used on the majority of the walk. Yeah. This last part with Him is drawing closer to Him and knowing that He's there. The other part was to count on the Holy Spirit, to know that that He's there, and that I need to really utilize that Holy Spirit that I wasn't, because I always felt there was something missing. You know how you're just not quite, you don't know what, but it's not. You're not
Sure.
something.
Yeah.
You don't quite fit. But the other one that I really loved, and he gave me actually when Pastor Terry retired, but I see that he's given it to me again now for some reason, is forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am bringing a new thing. Now, it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. And I think part of this, he brought it back up, it was because of all the sort of chaos in the country right now.
Sure, yeah.
Don't think about all these things. Just, I've got a new thing coming.
That's a great word. That's Isaiah 43.
Yes,
18 and
that
19.
is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I really like that. So I keep them all and I save them and I look at them because there's nothing quite as powerful as God's Word.
Yeah. Lola, thank you for sharing your journey with us. And you know, everybody's saying, no, let's keep going. Let's do 4 hours with Lola.
Well, it is continuing. Like I say, even today he showed me something else, and tomorrow he'll show me something new. Because I've got a lot of stuff, garbage to get rid of. And I've really learned that if I'm not growing in him, then I've got something I need to work out.
Yeah.
And so I'm so thankful for a God who doesn't let me get away with things. He draws me up short, but for me, such a gentle way.
Yeah.
And so I feel very blessed.
Yeah. Well, we're blessed to hear your journey. I'll ask the question I always ask, but has it been worth it walking with Jesus?
You know, I remember Joni Eareckson saying that if she was paralyzed and that she felt she walked closer to God because of that. And I thought, but if someone said to me today, Lola, I'd give you back your full eyesight in exchange for this closeness with God, wouldn't take it for not in a second.
Wow.
And my eyesight annoys me at times because I want to put my glasses on and see more clearly.
Yeah.
But not if I can't have this relationship with him.
Wow.
It's been the most glorious thing. And I thought, why didn't I do it sooner? But no, God said, it's my timing. It's my timing.
Wow.
So I'm just going to rejoice in what it is today.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. Thank you. As we close our time, would you mind praying in closing?
I don't mind at all.
Oh, thank you.
Lord, I am so thankful for the journey that you brought me on. It's been the most blessed thing. Yes, I was a slow learner and it took me a long time. But I saw, as I looked back, that you brought me through a lot of things. And I needed to learn them. And I think that makes me able to learn what you show me today. So I thank you so much that you never let me go. You kept pulling me back. And that I know tomorrow you'll lead me right where you want me to go, no matter what it looks like to me. Because I know, Lord, what is seen is temporary and what is unseen is eternal. And so, Lord, I just thank you and praise you for where you've taken me and where you're going to take me next. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you again.
That was hard.
Well, thank you all for joining us for the journey. Perhaps there's some words that you've heard spoken today that resonate or grab you, or somehow you know that you need to follow up on. If that's the case, please follow up. That's God prompting you. Call the church office, call my cell number, email us, chat on Facebook, but get hold of us so we can talk about God together, and you can begin your journey or continue your journey with God. Again, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. God bless.
The journey begins at the narrow gate. beckons me to roam the journey with path and street. The journey that takes me home. The journey takes me home.